I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm so focused on staying strong, sharp, and healthy that I lose sight of some of the other essential parts of aging better. Our internal lives, the pieces that help us feel connected, useful, valued, and fully engaged in life. Well, that's exactly what we're focusing on today. Stay tuned. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara, and this is Age Better. Today, we're talking about one of the most overlooked pieces of aging better, fulfillment. Not happiness exactly, not success, not simply staying busy. Fulfillment is deeper. It's the sense that your life still has meaning, that you still matter, that you feel connected, useful, valued, secure, and at home in your own life. And this matters to every one of us listening. We spend a lot of time talking about how to protect our bones, hearts, brains, muscles, and metabolism. Yeah, and we should, of course. But what about the life we're building around all of that? What about the emotional, social, and deeply human pieces of aging that determine whether we feel truly engaged in our lives or quietly disconnected from them? CenterWell, a division of Humana, has released a new report called the Fulfillment Index, looking at what helps older adults feel truly fulfilled as they age. One of the biggest findings is really striking. Only about half of adults over 62 say they feel fulfilled. So today we're going to talk about what fulfillment really means, why it matters to your health, why it can dip right around the age when people expect life to get easier, and what you can do now to build more purpose, connection, strength, joy, and meaning into your life. Joining me are two wonderful guests. Dr. Kerry Burnight is a gerontologist, author of JoySpan, and a returning guest to Age Better. Dr. Burnight's work focuses on joy, purpose, connection, and helping us rethink what later life can look and feel like. It's no wonder she's known as America's gerontologist. And Dr. Sanjay Shetty is the president of CenterWell, the organization behind the Fulfillment Index. CenterWell focuses on whole person care for older adults, looking not only at medical conditions, but at the full life of the person. You are going to love this conversation. All right, everyone, get ready to age better. Dr. Burnight and Dr. Shetty, welcome to Age Better.
We're glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
I am so excited about this study, the Fulfillment Index report that just came out, and I'm really eager to go over it and have you give us a little more insight into it. So let's start, Dr. Shetty, let's start with the big picture. This was not a quick poll by any means. The Fulfillment Index grew out of a multi-year research project from 2023 to 2025 and included input from 6,600 people, older adults, and used 72 different measures of well-being. And I found that really fascinating. Like in healthcare, we measure everything, our blood pressure, our weight, our VO2 max, if you're so inclined, like I always am, your bone density. So what made you and CenterWell decide that fulfillment was important enough to measure?
Yes, well, thank you so much for the question. Just to step back really quickly, just to remind everyone, CenterWell is the care delivery organization for Humana. We provide care to seniors all across the country through primary care, home health, and pharmacy. And one of the things that we were thinking about was we want to understand our patients better. And this is a really important population to understand. You may not be aware that every single day, 12,000 people are turning 65. By 2034, there will be more seniors than children. And so I think we wanted to understand those that we serve, and we wanted to get away from, I think, the typical thing that we talk about, which is if you're healthy, you must be happy. And certainly, I think as a healthcare company, that was our bias. And we also recognize that in general, that's just a really visible thing, right? When we see older adults, so they might have challenges with mobility, they may look a little bit older, and we weren't really digging under the surface. And that's what led us to do the research, as you described, took us a while to kind of go deep and really understand what mattered to our patients as they were aging. And so, what was so fun about this is that it really gave us a new lens to think about what it meant to age well and to look at it in a much more quantifiable way and to help us basically help our patients not just live longer, but live longer well. And that's what led us to the fulfillment index. And just for your listeners, fulfillment as a term is probably feels a little vague, but it actually is quite meaningful. It means that you have a sense of wholeness, fit, and value towards yourself, your life, and your impact. And it's a measure that's been studied infrequently and even less in older Americans, which is why we wanted to dig deep. And to be clear, as a healthcare company, we're not thinking that this is going to replace all of those great measures that you talked about. In fact, we hope that one day it will be a complement to all of them and help all of us, our care teams and others, to see a whole person more clearly. That's really what inspired us to go deep in this area.
Dr. Burnight, let's talk about the term fulfillment. When you look at it in the context of aging, what does it actually mean to you, and how is it different than happiness?
It's so exciting that we're putting light on it because here, as a gerontologist for 36 years, I have had patients and clients and friends and family talk about what matters, but there hasn't really been a vocabulary, and there certainly hadn't been a measure. And so fulfillment encompasses things that matter to people. It is purpose and connection, and it is the why about why we are wanting to live a long life. So happiness is great. I'm all for it, but it's a feeling and it comes and goes. Whereas fulfillment is a measure. It has to do with what matters to each individual. And I just could not be more delighted by the definition. It's really a dream come true for people who care about growing older and about the quality of life.
Dr. Shetty, so here's the finding that really stopped me. 54% of adults over 62 say they feel fulfilled, which means nearly half, 46%, do not. What does that mean to you?
Yes, I mean, I think you honed in on probably the most interesting fact from the whole study, right? That 54 on the one hand feels good. And then you're thinking, wow, that is almost half of seniors who are feeling a meaningful gap between living longer and living well. And so for me, what it really reinforces, fulfillment is shaped by so much more than physical health alone. And as we dug deeper into the data, we saw that the strongest drivers are those that we don't typically emphasize in healthcare. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about a few of these. But some of the ones that matter, that really stuck out to me, were that sense of like, are you feeling in the moment self-contented and emotionally stable? And below that, purpose, external validation, spirituality, optimism, gratitude. These are a much broader set of things than we typically think about in healthcare. So for me, the biggest takeaway was healthcare as an opportunity to broaden how we define support for older adults.
I'm finding that this age group, women in particular in their 60s, are really looking more at purpose. Like, what is their purpose now? Especially as life changes, as we know. Maybe they're retiring. Maybe kids have kind of flown the coop more permanently. It's a very interesting time. And Dr. Burnight, let's look at the human side of those numbers. So many people can look totally okay on the outside, right? They're busy, they're social, they're healthy, they're fit, they're maybe running marathons, but they still don't feel fulfilled on the inside. So why does that happen? What's happening?
I love that you bring that forward because what we're not talking about big smile on your face all the time, toxic positivity. It's much deeper, much more complex and individualized. And it's because of our success in terms of enabling our lives to be longer that we have this time where we're thinking, oh my goodness, I am not only going to survive, but I'm going to thrive. I'm going to keep leaning into life. And as we grow older, we become more like ourselves. We have the potential to be these more authentic versions. And because of that, we actually become more different. And I love that because sometimes on the outside, we can look more similar. On the inside, we're more uniquely ourselves. And that's why we can't really tell from the outside. So it is by asking, like taking a moment, like for your listeners right now to think, may I ask myself honestly, am I feeling fulfilled? And if I'm not, if I'm in that 46%, what is it? Is it that I wish I had more meaningful connection? Is it that I wish I was growing in a way of trying new things? And that answer is going to be different, but that answer matters.
Yeah.
And it's attainable because what we want is 100% of people 62 and better to say, I feel fulfilled by my definition.
The report also found something that I think will surprise people, that fulfillment can actually dip. It went down between the ages 65 and 67. And that right when we assume life is supposed to get a little easier, maybe a little more free, but then it does rise again. It does come back, that sense of fulfillment, steadily in your 70s and 80s, which is very encouraging, of course. Dr. Shetty, what did the data tell you about that interesting dip?
Yes, I'm glad you pointed it out. For me, it's such an interesting thing, right? Because so many of us talk about looking forward to retirement and we celebrate retirements with a birthday, with a party, with congratulations on your retirement. That's the language we use. And yet, I think what the study shows us is that retirement's not just a financial transition. It's actually a transition in who you are and your identity, right? So you're stepping away in retirement from longstanding routines, your social structures, your sense of daily purpose. It can create a real disruption in how you feel. And so that dip, I think, is really important because there may be a sense of freedom, but there's also that uncertainty, the loss of structure, and questions that you may have about connection and meaning. So again, coming from a care perspective, I do think it's an important window, right? I think it's important for us to think about all of these life transitions, retirement being one that really showed up in the data. It's not just about managing medical conditions, but thinking about everything that's possible in that time period. But I also love that you pointed out that it does ramp and improve over time, right? So from afar, you might say, well, that can't possibly be true, right? If fulfillment or happiness has to do with physical health, well, of course, it's just a downward slope. And the reality was it wasn't, right? People are finding those other things to feel fulfilled, to manage their well-being. And that's actually what we see in the data as time goes on. So I think helping people, supporting them through that transition, recognizing that it may not all be about the parties and the congratulations, but then also bridging them to that path to what they can find afterwards.
Right. Dr. Burnight, just to follow up to that, like, what do you think is happening emotionally when people do lose that structure that Dr. Shetty just described, their identity that might be tied up with the feeling that maybe they're not needed anymore? Talk to us a little bit about that emotion.
Yes, I'm glad. And I'd like to emphasize the dip. It isn't the case that, oh, well, my fulfillment will just go back up magically because I'm getting older. That isn't the case. It is that have chosen, people have put in the work to say, I had this certain identity and structure and way of going through life, and now my life is different in some ways. There's the dip, but then that recognition that these small choices that we can make by addressing these internal issues. So if we needed more challenge or more connection or more fun or more meaning or more getting uncomfortable and trying something hard,
Right.
54% of the people in this study were doing that. And what that shows to the rest of us is that we can do that too, that we can recognize that our fulfillment matters and that we're going to put the work in. And so in the same way that our physical health, we don't get stronger unless we lift weights. Similarly, our fulfillment doesn't just magically increase. It increases because we've prioritized it, because we've recognized that it matters and that we play the most important role in our fulfillment and that can be accessible to anyone despite the challenges, despite the very real physical health challenges and losing loved ones and a lot of tough
A lot of
diagnoses.
change. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were on the podcast not that long ago talking about your wonderful book, JoySpan, and everyone listening, there will again be a link to the book in the show notes. So if you haven't already gotten the book, please do check it out. And of course, there will be a link to the full fulfillment index report in the show notes as well. But when you were on the show, I mean, you said so many wonderful things. But one of the most important things that you told us was that it's a choice. Joy is a choice. Joy, choosing joy. So choosing any of these things as you go forward in life is so important. Like that's an important message. Choose it. And then put in the work, as you also said, and then put in that work. So a lot of women listening in right now are in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, and already asking, who am I now? What is this next chapter supposed to look like? What do I want it to look like? How can they use this information now to kind of shape their future?
So the recognition, first of all, that it's normal. We are all going to have times in this second half of life where you think, oh no, oh no, I have lost my life partner, or oh gosh, I have so enjoyed walking and now I'm not able to walk for various reasons. Or I, for example, lost my vision in my 50s, and that was a real struggle not to drive or use my phone. So, first of all, it's okay if you're feeling like, oh gosh, I am not feeling fulfilled. I am not okay right now. That is okay, because there is hope that we together are having resources. And with CenterWell's fulfillment index, the ability to talk with providers and family members and friends about these kinds of topics, that's going to be such a game changer, because before we had just kind of suffered in silence.
So, Dr. Burnight, one of the most interesting parts of the report is about being content, feeling at peace with your life, feeling less regret. So, how do we build on that feeling of contentment?
Yes, the fulfillment index research showed that self-contentment matters a lot. And a way that we can really optimize our self-contentment is to recognize that the messaging that we've been fed since the minute we were born has been that aging is bad and shameful and ugly and you are less relevant and can't do technology. And it simply isn't true. So it has been lucrative to make people fear aging like the plague and feel not content with themselves and that they're somehow supposed to be different or better. And that's where we, together with this new longevity, can say, actually, there are things that get better as we get older. And when a thought comes in like, oh, I'm not enough, or I should have done that better, or whatever, we can counter that. And so we can replace those thoughts with saying, you did the best you could given all that you were carrying. You have forward to go. We're not so much looking at the back. And of course, you're going to be different now. You're not supposed to be the same as you were at 30, 40, or 50. Now is a different phase, and this phase has different priorities, many of which are internal. And so it's sometimes my mom is 97 and she has a high fulfillment because she's worked on it. And she says, every once in a while, I kind of will slap myself when I say all this mean stuff to myself in my head. And I realize, Betty, you're doing a pretty darn good job. And I think we could really learn from people who go ahead of us, who have been able to maintain this self-contentment by having a compassion toward our older selves.
Yeah, and that's just so true. We can be so hard on ourselves sometimes. And also, I have to say, as much as I really love social media, I think it's a wonderful way to connect, especially, I think, for this age group. But sometimes it can have the reverse effect on you if you're seeing people doing these amazing things and traveling to these fantastic places, and you start to compare.
Yes. You see all these washboard abs and you think, my abs look nothing like that. Neither do theirs.
Or you see people like lifting heavy weights at the age of 70 and like you may not be able to do that. That doesn't mean you're a failure. So there's a lot of that comparison that I think could really wreak some havoc with that sense of self-contentment. But so everyone listening in, kind of ignore that noise. Dr. Shetty, the report also ties fulfillment to very concrete things like health, income, security, and whether someone lives alone. What does that tell us about the connection between aging well and the actual conditions that people live in every day?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just more proof that aging well is deeply connected to the realities of everyday life, right? And you mentioned all of them, right? Which is that what is going on in your day to day can have a really important impact. So I'll just reiterate them because I think they are important just as a framing device to start to think about what are the categories. And that includes things like emotional connection, security, social health, your living situation, being able to give back, and your physical health. And so, again, as a physician, I immediately go into physical health and I was like, wow, it didn't show up on the list until pretty low down. It's super important, but it also really matters with the circumstances that you're living in. And so, I think it's really important for us to understand it. What's interesting is as we dug deeper, the research showed that there was meaningful variation across the groups. And so, although none of these are linear or direct relationships, we did see that older adults with lower income, those in fair or poor health, and some sort of more vulnerable populations were less likely to report feeling fulfilled. And so, part of what we want to do if we're going to address fulfillment, we have to start to look at those underlying causes that are likely to predict that you're just not going to have that same sense of well being. There were some that were associated with higher fulfillment, like living with others. And so, I think it's really important to take that and say, wow, this isn't just abstract, right? These are real things happening to real people shaped by very tangible conditions. And so important for us as we think about it at an individual level, as we're having an engagement with an individual person or we're thinking about ourselves, but also at a society level, right? What would it take for us to get fulfillment to 100%? I love that aspiration. It would require us as a society to think more broadly than just healthcare. We need to think about all of these factors much more broadly.
Dr. Burnight, purpose. Let's talk about that. It's a word we hear constantly, a sense of purpose. So, does it have to be big? I feel like this one woman I'm thinking of, I feel sometimes like she has a sense that it has to be big, like it has to be so impactful, like she has to save the world. But does it have to be, Dr. Burnight? Or can it be just like kind of small things that add up that just make maybe this world a better place? Talk to us about purpose.
I think if we're honest, we would all have that feeling of, is my purpose, am I running out of time? Am I doing enough, serving enough? It's kind of this capital P purpose, which I think is not what we actually should be pursuing. I think of it really as what a person has to give. And every human, regardless of physical situation or even our monetary situation or the challenges that we carry, every human has something to give. And an example of, I recently had the privilege of working with a woman who's now 89 and her mobility is very limited. She's quite contracted, but her purpose, she's an incredible listener. Every time I go to where she lives, people are gathered around her bed talking and she is listening. People feel seen and supported. And I get in line because I want to have what she's giving. So if you think of listening, may not be splashy or loud, but it is so important and it is a purpose. But it's a lowercase p, these little
It's
small
a lowercase p.
things.
Yep.
Yes.
Dr. Shetty, you talked about physical health before. The index does include physical health as one of the day-to-day factors tied to fulfillment, including whether your physical health allows you to do the things that you want to do. I mean, this is a really big focal point of mine right now with preventing frailty and building your strength. And so, how does taking care of your body feed your sense of fulfillment? Talk to us about that.
It really is important. It's amazing how, as you dig deep with patients and dig deep with folks, you realize that their goals may have an element of something physical, but it actually represents so much more, right? So I'll give you an example. Someone who just wrote to me thanking me for their work in home health. They were so grateful to the therapist who helped them get up the stairs so that she could sleep in her own bedroom, right? And so obviously the mobility, the ability to walk up the stairs was a very clear physical goal, but it meant so much more because this is the room she'd slept in for decades, right? And to her, that was coming back
Yeah.
to normalcy. It was a very short term, very tactical goal. And yet for the therapist who suddenly realized like that was what was actually important, it was that connection to what was comfortable, what was familiar. It was less around the actual act of climbing up the stairs. She was lost, right? And she had lost something really important to her just in her day to day. And so I do think what you're describing is just so important, right? It allows you to do all of those other activities that allow you to engage in things that bring you happiness and well being, right? Whether that means I can be social now, I can actually be out enjoying my church because spirituality is the source of my strength, whether it means you can be out and volunteering because that sense of purpose and external validation is what drives you every day. That physical is really can become a barrier if not cared for. So I'm appreciative of what you're thinking about and how you're connecting the dot between this and what it is we're doing.
I do want to talk about feeling seen. If you go to a doctor or a healthcare provider and you don't feel seen, you feel ignored, or you're just feeling ignored in general by society, as very often people who get older can, as Dr. Burnight was talking about earlier, about this whole kind of view of aging. And we start hearing those negative views of aging from early on in life. And so we have this built-in bias, as we know. And so the report includes feeling appreciated, loved, understood, heard, and seen. So why is it so essential to fulfillment as we get older? Why is it essential?
Yeah, so I would say from my perspective, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about that perception of aging and the common discussion around aging and the media portrayal of aging and how detrimental that can be. And again, how easily that pushes us to this idea of saying it's all about your physical health. If you're healthy, you should be happy, go away, right? Like, and obviously we know it is so much more than that. So I do think starting there is a really important part to say we need to address that more broadly. And then if you go to the reason that feeling valued, feeling heard is so important is because this is a population that isn't seen as commonly in the media, isn't seen as commonly out there. And so you automatically start with that sense of loss. But I would say, from my perspective, what is so interesting and important is it is finding those other connection points and finding those ways in which you realize that you have very meaningful contributions to make to those around you, right? And whether those are people that you know every day because they're your family, whether it's because they're people that you see because you volunteer or because you see them at church, you are a part of other people's lives. And that is really what shows that connectivity, shows that relationship, shows that you are valued and for being who you are and what you're able to bring to the table. I think that's what we're able to say is so important as how we think about fulfillment.
Dr. Shetty, what do you hope to do with the Fulfillment Index report? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, and we're excited that folks on this podcast are going to get to hear about it. We are trying to share it as widely and as broadly as we can because we do think it should be part of a much broader conversation about what aging well means and what it could mean in America. So I think for us, part of it is just to get this message out there, to broaden the conversation and to get more folks. And I always come back to healthcare because that's where I work, but we want more folks just to be talking about it, to be asking people about it, and to really try to understand for folks in their lives what is important to them. So for me, that is probably the beginning of it. I'd say very specifically within CenterWell, we're hoping that we can begin to think about it almost as an additional vital sign, right? In addition to a lab result or a vital sign, we are using it as a way to engage with our patients, to have a much broader conversation, because we recognize so many of these things that we include in fulfillment and that play a role in older adults' well-being will also have an impact on their health and well-being. And so it's incumbent on us to learn about it. And so we're using it as a vehicle to talk to the folks that work within CenterWell, talk with our patients about it so that we can just get better at what we do, which is keeping patients healthy and well.
Final question. So for someone listening in right now who says, I'm not unhappy. Maybe I'm a little meh, but I'm not fulfilled either. Where should she begin? What is that one question that our listener who feels that way should ask herself tonight? Dr. Shetty, I'm going to start with you.
For me, it goes back to that core question that we've talked about a few times, which is what makes me happy, right? Like, what is it that makes me feel like I have a great sense of myself, my place in my life? And so having that honest conversation with yourself is that starting point. And I think I loved some of the earlier conversation, which was it's not how other people feel. It's not what other people's goals are. It's not what you're seeing out there in the media. It's what makes you happy. And so being able to have that conversation with yourself and find those small victories is probably the starting point that I would suggest.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Burnight, what's your one question?
I like, this meh, M-E-H. It's what the kids say, like, I'm feeling meh.
Meh.
We've all felt meh. And so when I work with patients who are feeling meh, I think the step one is Dr. Shetty is revolutionizing, which is the recognition that we are whole people, that it's much more than just what we have thought about before. And on an individual level, I encourage people the minute that you wake up, it is by default a lot of times that we start to list in our brains all that is wrong. My hip hurts, my daughter's getting a divorce, the radiator on my car is broken. Could we, in this process of trying to age well, start by listing out, before our feet hit the ground, 10 things that are going right? And I learned this from my own patients who are in their 90s and 100s who do this. And so I have a patient with profound full body osteoporosis. She finds something that doesn't hurt. And then she says, I'm going to go down and have a cup of coffee, which she loves. And I'm going to give a little snuggle to my dog. And then I'm going to pick up the phone, right? Trying to find those things that are right. The way that our brain works, the reticular activating system, is what we notice, is what we call attention to, is what we see. So when we are calling attention to that which is right, you see more of that. And an example I'll give you, if you buy a Toyota Corolla and you go out on the road, you just keep seeing more and more Toyota Corollas. They were there all along, but you weren't seeing them. Similarly, in our aging process, there are things that go wrong. I promise you that. But there are also things that are right. So maybe by tomorrow, kickstarting our ability to force ourselves to list 10 things that are right, or that we're grateful for, or that we want to work on or notice, maybe that will give us just a little bit of buoyancy to put the work in to go from meh to fulfilled.
Right. That's right. Hey, Dr. Burnight, I think you have the title for your next book, From Meh to Fulfilled in 10 Easy Steps. There you have it. You have to dedicate it to me. So funny. Well, I cannot thank the two of you enough for joining me today. I really wanted to go a little deeper into that really amazing fulfillment index report, which, again, everyone, the link to the full report is, and some other information about it, and of course about both of my guests, esteemed guests, is in the show notes, as is, as I said before, the link to Dr. Burnight's amazingly wonderful book, JoySpan, which is a New York Times bestseller. So I thank you both again for joining me. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then, subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.